In 1961, on completion of my studies at the London School of Economics, I went for an interview at the office of the Commission in the United Kingdom for the West Indian Federation. They were appointing community development workers and one for Manchester. I came to Manchester as such an officer, and this meant identifying where people from the West Indies were living, which meant at that time walking up and down the streets of Moss Side and knocking on doors. And it was on such an occasion that I met Beresford and Eloise Edwards. Eloise had recently arrived from Guyana. Part of my job was to invite people to become involved, to join their unions, their trade unions, and to consider what was happening in the community. And those community meetings I organised, and people came to them. And this led eventually to some more community activity. And from the beginning, Beresford and Eloise were active in these associations. A lot of activity went on, which led to the formation of the Guyanese Association. Part of it was Beresford's personal experience with his employers. He had some dispute with the SOGAT, which was the printers' union, and although he had authorized them to deduct payment for his union fees, they had failed to do so. And with SOGAT being a very closed union, they said he didn't have a card and therefore he should be dismissed. And so a case was brought before the court. And Beresford was awarded some recompense. Now, the union, of course, appealed against this, and there was a judgment in Beresford's favour because Lord Denning, who was Master of the Rolls at the time, said the rights of workers to work was more important. And in fact, this went on to be a very important case which is registered in the law history of this country. This activity, the fact that Beresford had to struggle and to become more aware of how the society worked in the legal system, strengthened him in his resolve to be active in the community. This led to further activities, and Beresford had come to England with a background of an awareness of the movement. Sorry.
Sorry.
Okay. Because his mother had been very active and he had certain political ideas in his head. He was concerned about the discrimination that black people were facing and was active in challenging, for example, the position of children in schools where they had been maybe turned out of school, and he took those cases up, and in many instances he was able to win the consideration by the school of the child's position. Every little success continued to strengthen Beresford's resolve. I think I could go on now to talk about the WIOCC. That is the West Indian Organization's Co-ordinating Committee. There was someone who was active in Manchester, a Joe leader, who was a very talented bandsman, and he organised social occasions. But these became rather noisy for the neighbours, And so other premises were offered, that is, the old school building on Carmoor Road. But one of the conditions of granting the use of this was that this should be made use of by more than one group of people. This put the idea of forming island organisations, because Joe Leader started the Leeward Island People's Association, and so in order to satisfy the condition of a wider use by the community, the idea of island organisations was developed. So you had the Barbados Society, Trinidad and Tobago, the Guyanese Association, and so on. And each of these island organisations, including the Guyana Association, sent representatives to the coordinating committee, which then had a wider voice and represented a wider section of the community. In each move that Beresford made, his concern about the discrimination of black people was prominent. It was the Marcus Garvey movement, which he had experienced in Guyana. And this led to his association with the African Liberation Movement. He became involved with the African organizations in Manchester, and this led on to his involvement in the Pan-African movement. Beresford was always on the qui-vive, always ready to make the most of every opportunity that came his way. And all the time, of course, he was in a learning position. When the City Council decided to give some funding to the Carmoor Road West Indian Centre, he went and studied for a year. He did youth and community work studies, and he was able to apply for the post of warden. He was appointed in 1972 as warden of Carmoor Road. And of course this meant that he had a status which helped him to intervene in many cases. People began to come to him with their experience of discrimination, and he would take these cases up. He was very keen to help black kids who were not doing well at school. He felt the system was operating against black youngsters. And so came the development of Saturday schools. This was a very important contribution in helping a number of black youngsters whose experience in school was not of the best, because many teachers didn't understand the background and history of these children and were very prone to pointing their fingers at them and saying they were not doing their best. The Saturday school was a wonderful supplement for these youngsters, because there were a number of volunteers from the community who came and taught those children on a Saturday, made a very special sacrifice really in giving several hours of their time to this task. And Barry was able to enlist the help of other fervent people. Roy Blackman's name comes to mind at this stage, because he also was a teacher in Manchester schools and was very fervent in his belief and his desire to help young black people to overcome what they saw, what he and Beresford saw as the disadvantages they were experiencing. So this was a very important stage in the proceedings. I was a teacher at Ducey High School, and then I went to work at the education department, which had a number of teachers, the support service, which went into schools, and we did in-service training in order to try and raise the awareness of teachers about the issues of what involved in multicultural education. And we ran training workshops. And there again, Beresford was able to contribute to that. But he was also able to organise a number of other courses. For example, training with the police was a very important aspect of the work that developed, making inputs, because we know that a lot of young black people were in a bad way with the police. The police were what we used to call stop and search. They were very vulnerable on the streets, and a very good educational program was developed, and Beresford was responsible for making inputs into that. Also, apart from social functions, there were a number of other training and other endeavours which took place at Carmoor Road, and that became well known as a centre for activity and where some of the Pan-African meetings were held. We know that there is a memorial plaque at All Saints to commemorate the meeting in Manchester, and that is a very attractive plaque which I think we need to take more young people to visit and to point out to them the fact that these Pan-African movement took place in Manchester, and that there is a memorial to remind people of that occasion. WIOCC was also active in each of its, when a plan was conceived in the committee of WIOCC, a lot of action went back to the island organisations, because that is the strength of it, and so involving a wider section of the community. And by the number of activities that were taking place in Carmoor Road, which was the axis for the WIOCC, there were, like I have mentioned, the work with black pupils, with the police, and with other sections of the community. It certainly became a hub for a great deal, inspiring other people to go out and to take their place, giving confidence to black people to question what was happening to them in their workplaces. That was an important part of what was happening at the hub. The fact that it was helping to empower other people in their everyday lives to challenge, to fight for fairer means, because it was a time of a great deal of discrimination for black people. Beresford was a very strong character, very forthright, and he did not stand fools gladly. And when you were good, you were very, very good, but if you were bad, you were horrid. So he didn't stand being challenged too much, you know. He had his ideas, very strong man, both physically and intellectually. And he didn't really like to be challenged with his ideas. I got on well with him. He had a great sense of humour, but you know, sometimes people's sense of humour is on a different track to your own. He was always ready to listen to me. We could have good discussions together. And I recall the occasion when I was so pleased with that plaque that is there at All Saints. So we had a meeting there, and I made up a little song about it, you know. Plaque that black, black all around, and the red colour glistening in the sunshine, and the letter standing out proud. And on occasions like that, you know, there was such good feelings of bonhomie and strong feeling that we could achieve. I think that was part of his advantage of his approach, that he helped people to have a good sense of their own self, enhance their self-respect and their convictions that they could go ahead and achieve. If they had a challenge, you can overcome it. He had so many battles to fight, and each battle that he fought made him stronger. And those resources that developed within him, he used to inspire others with it. You have a problem, you can overcome. Let's see how we can do, what action is needed. And so this very positive approach to not allowing things to pile up on top of you. Stand up tall, question what is going on, and you will find a way. And I think that is one of the big strengths of Beresford, his effect on the rest of the Caribbean community, which he inspired, and there you had a whole array of heightening of awareness of the community, and an awakening and a desire to act, not to let things roll over you, but to stand up tall, be proud of yourself, and to overcome. I think that was part of the strongest aspect of Beresford. Beresford had so many challenges to face. He had to overcome a great deal of opposition. That gave him strength, but it also gave him very good insights. And therefore, when people came to him with their situations, he was able to inspire others to question their situation, to ask, what is it that what action might you take in order to overcome the challenges you're facing? And he was able to inspire others. This was one of the strengths of Beresford. He was able to inspire other people to be active, to not sit down and accept bad treatment, to stand up tall, to make an assessment of their situation, to make a plan of action, and he would help people to develop those plans. This empowerment of other individuals, members of the black community, I think that was one of the strongest contributions that Beresford made, and that he will be remembered for that for a long, long time. Well, I'm Betty Luckham. I'm also from Guyana and came to Manchester in '59 to get married. Was a student at the London School of Economics. And after I had a couple of children, I trained as a teacher and taught at WIOCC High School. When I left WIOCC, I went to the University of Manchester and read psychology. So I'm a graduate of the University of Manchester. And after that, I worked on racial justice issues for 10 years. And that gave me a very particular insight into what is happening in this country, because that involved me traveling up and down the country. Organised the Congress of Black Catholics in 1990. That was a most wonderful experience. But that is another story.